Hey folks, it's Rick Manning here, President of Americans for Limited Government. Big news in Washington D.C. is the release of the Fulton County grand jury report, which indicates that apparently the grand jury in Fulton County, well, Atlanta, Georgia, wanted to indict everybody, whoever said anything about the Georgia election and the validity of the Georgia election. Here's Donald Trump's response, and it's as usual right on point. The Georgia grand jury report has just been released. It has zero credibility and badly taints Fani Willis and this whole political witch hunt. Essentially, they wanted to indict anybody who happened to be breathing at the time. It totally undermines the credibility of the findings and badly hurts the great state of Georgia, whose wonderful and patriotic people are not happy with this charade of an out-of-control prosecutor doing the work for the DOJ election interference. So Donald Trump, pretty straightforward. It's damning, but Lindsey Graham, interestingly, and the two at the time sitting Georgia senators were all three targeted for indictment by this grand jury. Just astonishing stuff. But so here's what Lindsey Graham says. I got this off of a Charlie Kirk Twitter post or X post. Here's Lindsey Graham.
This is troubling for the country. We can't criminalize senators doing their job when they have a constitutional requirement to fulfill. It would be irresponsible for me, in my opinion, as chairman of the committee, not to try to find out what happened. We're opening up Pandora's box here.
That was brand new reaction from Senator Lindsey Graham.
We're opening up Pandora's box here. That is exactly right. For those of you who don't remember, Pandora's box is Greek mythology. It came from, what happened was it was a box where all the evil in the world was sealed up, and it was, and then somebody opened it, and the evil came out, and evil begets evil. So a grand jury that wants to sit there and said, "Gee, we think it's a good idea to prosecute a sitting senator for inquiring to the Georgia Secretary of State about the election and about election integrity." That's insane. That's insane. No, you can't ask any questions about the election because otherwise you might get indicted by a crazy grand jury. I mean, this is a precedent that is, and mind you, the people we're talking about right now were not indicted, okay? But the truth of the matter is, with a grand jury indictment recommendation in the hip pocket, the DA could go ahead, and Fulton County DA could indict any of them at any time because the grand jury's already recommended it. So what you have is, in Lindsey Graham's case, he was the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Was there election fraud? He's trying to find out what the truth is. He calls the Secretary of State of Georgia and says, "Dude, what's up? What's going on?" And presses him on some questions. And that got interpreted, we were trying to influence the outcome of the election. No, he's trying to get to the bottom of what the heck's going on. Apparently, nobody's allowed to ask any questions if the election goes the way the left likes. But they are. But if it doesn't, if the left likes it, you can ask. You're not allowed to ask questions. If it goes the way the left doesn't like, you can have Stacey Abrams running all over Georgia for 4 years, claiming that she's governor, and nobody does anything. They say, "Oh, well, that's Stacey. She won. She should have won. She didn't win, but she doesn't have the votes. She doesn't even have a recount possibility." But no, she thinks she won, so she can go around trying to discredit the governor of Georgia and the government in Georgia, and with the goal of intimidating the elected politicians into acquiescing in the future, which did a pretty good job. She did a pretty good job. I'm going to just get a little personal here because the person one of the people who was on the list of being indicted is a person I've known and been called friend for 30 years, Cleta Mitchell. And I've known Cleta for forever. And And she's a former member of the House of Delegates in the House of Representatives in the state of Oklahoma. She was a Democrat. She was chairman of the Appropriations Committee. She came to Washington, D.C. She spent a lot of time working in the term limits movement, actually, and leading a term limits group. She went off and became, and she became an election law expert and probably the premier election law expert on the conservative side. And Cleta is a straight shooter. She was threatened with indictment. The jury voted to indict Cleta Mitchell. I'm going to tell you what the effect of that is and the effect of the release of that. It's not just the attorneys who got indicted, who actually got indicted. The release of the idea that Cleta Mitchell, who was advocating in an area where she had absolute expertise on behalf of a client, the President of the United States, to try to ensure that every vote and only every vote that was legitimately cast got counted and got counted properly. She was doing her job representing the President of the United States as an attorney, advocating in real time to make certain that the Georgia elections and the counting was done accurately. Every single candidate in America should be shuddering at the idea that if they attempt to question the initial count, that their attorneys can be indicted. Not just them, but their attorneys. What attorneys are going to say, sign me up for a 4-year proctology exam, losing my career because I stood up and said, wait a second, this was wrong. The objective here is to make it so any attorneys on the conservative side think 3 times before even representing clients in elections, and particularly as it relates to election fraud. This is such a dangerous precedent that it is almost unbelievable that the Fulton County DA would embark upon it. Because remember, the Fulton County DA, the grand jury didn't just come up with, charge these people by themselves. Fulton County DA had to present charges to the grand jury that they could then say, and then they could vote on those charges. Because if the Fulton County DA hadn't recommended charges, the Fulton County grand jury wouldn't been voting on them, and we know they voted on them. Folks, this is a direct attack on your right to vote, your right to have your vote counted, your right to expect that the vote you cast is not overridden by votes that are made up. This is about the one person, one vote principle that must prevail in this country. And to put it plainly, what we've seen from this out of control, crazy grand jury indicting Rudy Giuliani for investigating the election fraud. Oh, you can't look into it. No, Rudy, you can't actually go and look into this. Expanding Jenna Ellis, who put her career on the line and to do this, and is another person who I know, and kind of you look at it, you just go, how the hell? This is not a shot across the bow. This is a shot into the stern of the vessel, saying with an attempt to sink the American electoral system. We see the fraudulent charges up in New York City on just FEC violations that they have no jurisdiction over. You see what's going on with the special counsel from the Department of Justice Bureau of Disinformation and Political Warfare. Those things are all outrageous because they attack fundamental rights that Donald Trump has. But the Fulton County case is an attack on the ability to actually to question elections. It's an attack on our legal system. And anybody who doesn't see it for exactly what it is wearing blinders. So when you see people who are on the supposed right, who are going around trying to pretend that, oh, we're living in normal times. I'm going to just go to an article written by Mark Stein today. Mark Stein's a pretty smart guy. You sub in for Rush. And I think I'm just going to read this one quote from Stein that somebody else wrote up as being a good quote by him. So Stein just copied him. But here's what Stein said. So 2 years later, the American right still talks about the justice system in the election campaign as if either term means what it does in functioning societies. As I said above, I don't intend to comment on this week's Trump indictment either, nor do I wish to talk about who would make the best president, who has the best platform, who has the skill set to implement the platform. That would all be well and good if we were in, say, France. But when the dirty, stinking, rotten, corrupt U.S. justice system is criminalizing political opposition, there's no point in pretending that this is a normal situation, right? I mean, think about that. Think about that. That is the key to it. And yet, as he points out, but we pointed out in previous broadcasts, we look at the Republicans on the debate stage in Wisconsin. Republicans who stood there and pretended, and almost to a person, pretended that we're in a normal situation. The vice president, stand around and act like I'm right. You all have to say, I was right. I was courageous, defend the Constitution. Come on. If you're going to defend the Constitution, Mike Pence, if you're going to defend the Constitution, Chris Christie, how about if you're more outraged about what's happening when our legal system is weaponized than by those who were the victims of that weaponization? How about if you move past January 6th and look at what's happening now? All those sanctimonious politicians are nothing more, nothing less than enablers. They are the Vichy of America. They are dangerous because they think they can pretend that what every one of us can see happening to our electoral system, to our legal system, isn't really happening. And it's only Donald Trump and his supporters. And after all, they kind of deserve it, don't they? So when you sit there and you listen to the people who are the new normal, the standard conservative, candidate who the establishment will throw up there at you, just understand, if they're not outraged of what's going on in Fulton County, if they're not outraged of what's happening with special counsel, if they're not outraged over the treatment of prisoners and the J6 prisoners, where a grandmother who walked around, basically spent 15 minutes in the Capitol taking selfies, gets a 2-year term. If they're not outraged by those things, then they simply don't understand the challenges facing our country, and they might as well, they're stuck in the 1980s. It's astonishing that people are walking around sentient, who think of themselves as leaders, don't understand what's really going on. And perhaps this news that that the grand jury wanted to indict Senator David Perdue, Senator Kelly Loeffler, both from Georgia, and Senator Lindsey Graham from South Carolina, maybe that will wake up the people in the U.S. Senate and around Capitol Hill, that they are not exempt from this crazy, because Pandora's box is open. And once the guillotines hit the streets, no one is exempt from the cut of the blade. This is Rick Manning, and I'm just outraged. It's Friday, and I hope that you have a great weekend. And I want to say, we're coming up upon 9/11, and I won't be available to do a podcast on 9/11. I just want to say that as we are 22 years removed from 9/11, I encourage you to try to find the video of the planes hitting the buildings. I encourage you to show that to those who you can, that won't get blanked out by the various social media sites. I encourage you to do that for a simple reason. A battle was waged on 9/11. And now, and unfortunately, the choice is made on our civil liberties in order to protect ourselves against those who would take cutting instruments and take over planes and fly them into buildings. The bitter fruit of many of those decisions to pass the Patriot Act and the like are why we have the censorship regime that exists in America. Department of Homeland Security didn't exist pre 9/11. It exists now, and it's the quarterback, or the point guard, more likely the point guard in the whole censorship regime. The empowering of our intelligence agencies and the weaponization of our intelligence agencies to protect America and to protect Americans took a dramatic turn after 9/11, as those intelligence agencies were no longer looking outward, but were looking inward. And remember that the people who came here with the intent to run planes into the World Trade Center and into the Pentagon and into the White House, many were illegal. The one thing we said we were going to do, we gave away our rights through the Patriot Act, but we never closed our border under George W. Bush. We never closed our border. We never closed our border under Obama. Donald Trump fought like crazy and had to fight his own Congress, the Republicans in Congress, to get anything done in closing the border. And now we have a wide open border with 6 million people coming across. These people all tell us that we need to have all the spy agencies all geared at American citizens. We have to put a whole, infrastructure in place to be able to listen in and to have a capacity to censor Americans' thought and discussion and discourse. And at the same time, they continue to allow those who would destroy our country, terrorists and thugs, to intermingle amongst the masses who are flowing across our border regularly, to come across in areas where are unprotected. They sell the material that could put more wall up in areas of most dangerous for crossing. They sell the material at 10 cents on the dollar because they refuse to do their job. And when people say to you, sorry, we had to give up you just have to be willing to give up your freedom because we have to make certain that bad people don't do bad things. Perhaps the first job should be to identify, to stop the bad people, the terrorists who are coming across our borders, to actually make our borders secure so that those who seek harm to Americans are not walking across our border with open arms from the people who are supposed to secure that same border. That isn't a Republican issue. That's not a Democrat issue. Republicans and Democrats are both culpable on that issue. It's an American issue. So on this, as we approach 9/11, I think of the families who lost their loved ones, and I think of our country who lost some of our freedom because of the reaction to those attacks. I think of the people, the families that lost their loved ones in Afghanistan, all the way to the disastrous ending where Joe Biden effectively abandoned our allies and our troops there and our military hardware there in Afghanistan. But I think of our service members who lost their lives in Iraq and fighting terrorism around the world. The battle against terrorism is not a bad battle. The permanence of war and the constant state of war and the money that generates, that perpetuates it, is just an offshoot of that. We have to have a country that listens to its people, and the people need to be heard. On this 9/11, pray for the survivors, pray for this nation, that we can get back some of our foundational principles of freedom and can get back under control those who are supposed to be working for us and not themselves. With that, I'll let you go. Thank you very much.